You're listening to Range Minded from Independence Indoor Shooting. Before we get started, please leave us a rating and some feedback from wherever you get your podcasts from. It really does help us make better content for you. This is episode 95, where we talk with a special guest, Terry Piper of the Ultimate Hybrid Holster, the Idaho Enhanced Academy, where he takes a reality-based approach to firearms training and concealed carry, and Terry's also on the Openly Concealed podcast. So naturally, we've got plenty to talk about. We really enjoyed recording this episode, so we hope you enjoy listening to it. And as always, thanks for listening to episode 95 of Range Minded, the Terry Piper interview. Hello and welcome to Range Minded from Independence Indoor Shooting. My name is Mark Long and I am joined by...
Terry Piper.
By Steve's... Oh yeah,
I'm not supposed to say anything.
He beat you to the punch, Steve. How about that?
It's okay. It's okay, Terry. Whatever. It's cool. It's
yeah,
cool.
You know.
Yeah, Terry's our guest. We decided to bring Terry in. Everybody should know me that listens regularly. I'm Steve. Nobody special.
Just a guy.
Just a guy.
Over in eastern Idaho. But yeah, we have...
but I'm not just any guy. Let's see if you can hear it. Oh, yeah, that's right.
Oh, that's just rude. We got nothing like that here.
Yeah.
That's a Bundaberg.
I'll bring some next time.
All right, sounds like a winner.
Have you had a Bundaberg ever, a ginger beer, Terry?
I've had ginger beer before, but I don't know what brand it was. But
Oh, okay. Because this is
the best ginger beer available.
Okay. All right. Well, you'll have to. I'll be the judge of that.
Okay.
So you have to bring some next time, Steve. Steve was actually here last weekend, and I was surprised I didn't have one waiting for me on the table.
Oh yeah, we were trying to get
them.
together, but it just I've got a busy schedule too.
That's okay. You're a busy guy, actually, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So let's just jump right in. Right. You are the man behind the Ultimate Hybrid Holster.
I am the man, one of the men. I mean, I partnered with Nick Hoffer from Hoftac, and that's how that kind of came about. And now I'm the sole proprietor. He's busy enough with Hoftac.
Yeah. We've had him on the show a couple of times. He's a good friend of the show. So.
Yeah, he's a busy guy. He's an industrious guy. And,
he is.
So, yeah.
He doesn't sleep.
Actually, I think he spends more of his time sleeping during the day and then works all night. Yeah, he's kind of a night owl.
Oh, okay. I just thought he never slept because he just seemed like he's always doing stuff and always doing something.
He generally is. Yeah, he's very industrious.
Yeah, but that's not all you do either. You do other stuff too.
So I have a training academy myself called Idaho Enhanced Academy. So I do personal protection. I do the Idaho Enhanced classes, private tutoring training. A little bit of everything.
Cool.
And then I also have my own podcast.
Very
cool. We started about a couple months ago called Openly Concealed, where we just have candid conversations about concealed carry and the good, the bad, the ugly, the things that people don't learn in class.
Sure.
You get that minimum basic Idaho law that says you got to take 8 hours, you got to spend 100 rounds on the range, and you've got to have a lecture by an attorney or an intermediate certified law enforcement officer. And
right.
So, I think a lot of people kind of miss the boat in a lot of training. I also contract for another company, a national company called Legal Heat. So I teach all the Cabela's, all the Sportsman's Warehouse classes.
Wow.
I get this overwhelming sense, and one of the reasons I do what I do is because I'm very passionate about it. I grew up in the pawn business, and getting guns pointed at you on a daily basis was like the thing. Yeah.
Yikes.
And then when I was 16, my brother shot me with a 12 gauge insider shot, playing with a Winchester Model 97.
Damn.
And 3 feet away, ricocheted off the floor, hit me in the calves. And so,
wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, it was those things that really kind of shaped my passion and my desire to teach and train.
Yeah.
And then create, later when I kind of got involved in the holster business, I was an executive for Crossfire Shooting Gear.
Okay.
And designed 2 of their best-selling holsters to date. And then got laid off. So that's kind of how Ultimate Hybrid came about.
Sure.
And, it was out of necessity. I went to work for Nemo Arms in the interim. But while I was at Nemo, I launched Ultimate Hybrid.
Cool. So, yeah, that's pretty admirable that because you'd think that if most people got shot, they would end up hating guns and rally against them and be an anti-gunner or whatever, and you kind of went the opposite route.
Yeah, I kind of did because I think through some of the things that happened in my childhood, and then watching my dad almost shoot my mom playing around with a gun.
Yeah,
and bless their souls, they're gone now, but. It really got me fired up and kind of just wanting to have conversation and talk about this whole thing of guns, because a lot of people, they kind of go the opposite spectrum and think, oh man, guns are the bad thing. And, a gun's no different than any other tool you use, a Stanley hammer or a shovel, or, it's made to do something, but depending on the person behind it, kind of depends on where it goes, whether it's evil or whether it's just a tool. And so with that, I just it got me passionate about just having conversations. And that's kind of what my podcast is about, is just let's not argue and call each other names.
Right.
Let's not, say you're here and I'm here and, we can't get along. Let's have a conversation and find out how we can kind of grow towards the middle, because I'm as two-way as it gets. But at the same time, we have to be prudent, we have to be reasonable, and we have to be people that are looking out for other people and not trying to push buttons, not trying to start argument and right off the bat in one of my podcasts, somebody called somebody out and I'm like, hey, come on, man, that's not what we're here for.
Yeah.
We're not calling people names. We just want to talk. And that's all I want to do. And I want to just kind of get people acclimated to the idea that it's not what you hear. I hear so much bad street advice in classes.
Right.
I'll have 20 to 30 students in a class at Cabela's, and a lot of questions and a lot of bad street advice.
Yeah, I bet you probably hear a lot of. What's the number one bad advice or bad thing you hear?
If you shoot somebody outside your house, drag them inside.
People actually take that seriously?
Oh yeah, people take it very seriously. Yeah, my buddy told me, if I shoot somebody outside, make sure I drag them inside. And I'm like, that is the worst advice I've ever heard in my life.
Wow.
And then,
how much do you like prison?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, people just don't understand the ramifications of letting emotion, a fear-based emotion, dictate their action, which later causes ramifications in legal, social, mental, all of it. And they just really don't get the concept of all the things that, right, wrong, or indifferent in that moment doesn't dictate what happens. I mean, there are ramifications later that turn out way bad. And people just don't think about them because it's not in their mind. In their mind, they're thinking, okay, well, the law says this, and I can do this, and I can do that, and I can do this, and it's just never cut and dry.
Yeah, and like we've talked about on this podcast before, is that every round that leaves that gun in a self-defense situation or home defense situation has a lawyer attached to it.
Oh, absolutely. And, and I like to point out, when I was running the simulator for forward movement, putting people in the simulator was my favorite thing, because they go in there and they go Mel Gibson, you pop up a scene, and they get their Glock out and they bang 16 rounds out there. And I go, okay, let's go back and look at this for a second.
Yeah.
First of all, you shot. And so we track the shot, the fall of shot. And so I'm going back and debriefing. Okay, 1, 2, 3, and we're counting all these shots they pounded out there. Well, maybe the last 2 are in the bad guy.
And the other 14 were all over the place.
All over the place. And this is what I'm saying. I'm like, who do you think is going to pay for the Tesla across the street? That's not going to be the bad guy. And who do you think is going to pay for that kid you shot playing soccer in the park?
Yeah, man.
Those are the things that people don't think about. And I'm like, if you even boil it down to simple math, an average shooter can shoot, 15, 16 rounds in 10-ish seconds?
Yeah, pretty fast, yeah.
Yeah, and so you think about 16 rounds of liability when you could have really taken a lot of time, taken 4 seconds, put 2 shots on the bad guy, stop that action, and mathematically it makes more sense. Liability-wise, it makes more sense. And, people aren't taught that. They just hey, I got to stop the action. Yeah, that's cool, but you can generally stop it with 2, maybe 3, sometimes more. It depends on how, what, why, when, and where. But,
right.
Every situation is different.
Yeah, and you can't, even attorneys will tell you can't draw a linear line and go right, wrong, yes, no, yes, no, yes, 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 yes. Whatever that. There's so much sway room.
Yeah.
In all of that, and I like to point out the Idaho Code 18-4009 on justifiable homicide. And I make people read it. It's 4 paragraphs. And I'm like, you show me where you see the first period. So they read 4 paragraphs of, some of it old terminology. Sounds like the Queen's English.
Really?
Master, mistress, servant, slave. And I'm going, okay, so that's been in there for a while.
Yeah, seriously.
And then you look down at the bottom, and the last time this code was updated was 1972.
Oh, wow.
And so people are like, well, why do you bring all that up? And why do you bring up where's the first period in this 4 paragraphs? Well, it's at the very end, very end of 4 paragraphs. And I say, what does a period offer in any sentence? Finality or the end, right? Well, you don't have that with this law that stipulates what you have to do to be classified justifiable homicide. And
that's intense.
Yeah, then people start going, whoa, and I guess I never really...
Yeah, the gravity of the situation kind of hits them.
Yeah, and I think in this whole realm of concealed carry, that's the thing that scares me the most. It's not bad guys. I'm equipped to train or deal with those guys. I'm trained to deal with those guys. What I'm afraid of is the after action, the legal aspect afterwards, whether I'm right, wrong, or indifferent. And we can do things all day long based on principle, but I can show you a lot of principled people that are sitting in jail right now because of principle. And, well, I have that right. Yeah, you do. But guess what? You just lost everything you were fighting for in the first place, your freedom.
Yeah. It sounds like, well, Steve, did you have something?
Well, I was just thinking, you touched on it when we first started the conversation about the minimum of what Idaho State requires. And I've noticed that with a lot of class curriculum, like the 1,000-foot view of what they're teaching in the curriculum. And it seems like every time I look at the class descriptions, it's meets the minimum requirements for the state. and why do I want to go to a class and each class has benefits, don't get me wrong, but
sure.
Why do we have to go just the minimum? Why can't some instructors, like it sounds like you do it a little bit, you go a little bit deeper than just water skiing. Let's delve into some of the reality of it.
Well,
you don't have to just meet the minimum requirement. Let's exceed the minimum requirement.
Exactly. I like to tell people, if nothing else, if we don't have time for me to drill something into a student, I'm going to at least acclimate you to the idea that this is what you need to know. And I know a lot of instructors don't teach malfunctions. Well, malfunctions are, a critical part of learning how to run your gun. And I know,
and they're inevitable.
Oh, absolutely. And especially under stress. Stress is what changes all the rules. It synergistically goes wrong in that moment of stress. So if you don't have a good understanding of how to correct malfunctions in your gun, the bad guy picks the time, the place, and the conditions. So we're already at deficit, right? When we reach that encounter, we're at deficit. So we have to make sure everything else goes in our favor, which means knowing how to fix a malfunction. And so, and then acclimating people to the idea of this legality. It's not just cut and dry. And even though the law says this, don't hang your hat on it because, you talk to any defense attorney in the Valley and they'll tell you can try the same case, 5 different counties in Idaho, and come out with 5 different outcomes where people go to jail, where people get off.
So it almost sounds like a crapshoot almost.
It is. And so, I like to bring this up to people because, I love watching like crime drama, Forensic Files. I mean, those are some of my favorite shows.
Yeah.
And my mind kind of, thinks like that. But if anybody's ever been in a court situation where they've been chosen for jury, it is a big chess match because you've got prosecution and defense, and they're both taking so many opportunities to kick jurors loose based on their belief. So if you've got a capital murder case where you know that your client's going to get the death penalty, you're trying to stack that jury with people who don't believe in the death penalty, who don't believe in capital punishment.
Yeah, it's all a jury selection.
Yeah, and so you've got prosecution and defense that are both trying to stack the jury in their odds. And at the end of the day, it really is a crapshoot. And, and it's kind of funny how they word the law when it says, hey, jury of your peers, because I'm like, no, those people that couldn't get out of jury dirty, those guys are not my peers. My peers are the guys I work with, go to church with, shoot with, hang out with. They're the ones that know my motive, my actions, my heart, my compassion. Not 12 strangers that don't know me from Adam. Those aren't my peers. They're not. I don't even care about their how they view me. I care about how these guys view me.
Crazy.
Crazy.
It is crazy. It's frustrating, but it's the reality. I mean, we live in a society where it seems like the lawyers get their ways a lot more often than not.
Oh, and honestly, at the end of the day, the lawyers are the ones that make out because it doesn't matter if their client wins or loses. They still got to pay.
And they're going home at the end of the night.
Right. They got to go home and see their wife and kids at the end of the day. And that's another thing I instruct my students on. We're not out to kill anybody. We're not out to do anything. We want the same thing that everybody else wants. We want to go home and be safe at the end of the day and see our wife and family and kids. And in the pursuit of that, and we do something like I said, right, wrong, or indifferent, it really doesn't matter in the purview of the law and the lens of the law, and whether it was reasonable or not. You've got to get 12 people to look at that without the benefit of hindsight, without the benefit of a lot of things, and just go, okay, if I was in that same situation with all the same actors, same information, I would have done the same thing. That sounds reasonable. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember I was actually on a jury for a civil court. This was back in a couple of years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, and I mean, it was a wrongful death kind of. It wasn't like a criminal case, but even then, it was still a couple weeks long. Yep. You know, and it's long and drawn out, and going through jury selection about, do you have any family members who have been affected by X, Y, and Z?
That's what they're asking,
and it's intense, man. And you can, and they'll throw you off for no reason. And even like they got at me because I didn't say anything. Like they were asking like, well, what do you guys all think of this or whatever? And I just kind of sat there and silent. I'm like, and then eventually called me out. They're like, well, you haven't said much. What do you think about some of this stuff? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, and so I guess my reticence to speak, I guess, just got me onto the jury. But I mean, it's an intense thing. And most of the time, I think a lot of jurors just want to be done with it. You know, I have a pretty good attention span for stuff, but I can imagine some people who are just like have ADD or like need to be constantly stimulated or something like or addicted to your phone, no matter what the age. I mean, they just probably aren't even thinking about it. They're probably just drawing doodles in their notebook or whatever. And they already know kind of how they're going to vote if they need to, you know, and it's kind of weird and scary to think about that. So what do you think, though, that you can do, or what's something that we can do, or that maybe you teach that to kind of turn the odds into your favor instead of making it a crapshoot?
Well, that's it. In my personal classes, by the end of the class, I'm teaching trigger diagnostics because here's one of the things I've realized, and I'm a kind of a technical guy. You know, I was a copier service manager. I understand process. I understand if it takes this to make something work, well, then it's easier to figure out where things break down, right? Easier to troubleshoot. Sure. And I kind of approach handling guns in the same manner. If people understand why they're shooting off, well, then they can correct it. So they don't necessarily need me, you know, yelling over their shoulder, hey, tap it, rack it, flip it, you know, or whatever the malfunction is. If I teach them how to symptomize it and then how to diagnose it, and then I tell them, hey, it's your job to go practice this until it becomes, you know, I talk about going from unconscious, I don't have my notes with me.
That's okay.
Where we go through the 4 stages of the way our minds work, where we don't know what we don't know at first. Sure. And then through training, through all of these things, technique, skill, tactics, we go to that unconscious consciousness where our brain knows where to go and how to get there. And so my teaching style is very, you know, you can call it what you want, but I really have adapted the front sight teaching method into my class. So I've taken something I learned in 4 days or going through instructor development at front sight and cram that into a full day's course in my course where people are learning malfunctions. They're learning how to do trigger diagnostics, and they know that when their gun shoots here, it's because they did this. And a little more in depth of what they need to do. And you guys know Leroy Graham. Oh yeah. You know, I use a lot of his, you know, a lot of his words, and one of them is, at the end of the day, if you kind of break it all down and boil it down to its basics, your job at the end of the day is to get sight alignment, sight picture, and then press the trigger without moving your sights. Yeah, it's a simple process. It's just difficult to do. That's exactly right, and that's what I tell people. I said it sounds really, really easy, but if you don't put the time in and the practice in and the effort in, it'll never happen. It'll never get to that unconscious consciousness where your brain just knows where to go. Well, and we've talked about too on podcasts past that, you know, shooting is a depreciating skill, and if you don't regularly go to the range, I mean, Steve and I just we did a review last week of the Glock 44 and the the Smith & Wesson M&P Shield 9 EZ. That's a mouthful. Yeah. And we both were like, well, we haven't shot in a while or whatever. And we can kind of hold our own, but it's like, you could tell, like, you know, but the difference is, like you said, is that we've been shooting long enough, I think, and I can probably speak for Steve on this, is that, you know, we both kind of knew what we were doing and why we were shooting off. Would you say that's right, Steve?
Yeah, well, even if I get rusty, I at least remember enough to go back to the fundamentals and you can go back to the base. Yeah, and you know, as a copier guy, I used to tell people that all the time. Go back to the basics. Yeah. If you go back to the basics, it'll get you back up to speed. And for me as an instructor, you know, I think with a lot of instructors, you spend so much time teaching, you don't spend as much time shooting as you should. Yeah, right. Yeah, and busy. So I would when I was working. I was an executive for Crossfire. I was working part time for Matt
at Forward Movement in the evenings, 4 hours a night every evening.
Wow, jeez.
And then I was working part-time for Front Sight, going there a couple times a year, and then I would take a group of guys with me a couple times a year as a student. And I found myself in between trips to Front Sight where my skills would dilapidate. And then I'd go to Front Sight and I'd be up on that plateau where I'm like, hey, I'm ready, steady. And I'm on it. And then I would go back to teaching for, 3-4 months and would taper off. And so now one of the techniques that I use is a lot of times, depending on how big the class is, I'll jump in the line with students and call the line from the line. And it kind of
to stay on top of it.
Yeah, because it allows me to shoot. And I always tell people, I'm not doing this to show off. This is because my skills are perishable just like yours are. And so, it also kind of gives you an idea, what things should look like, how smooth it should be, and how fast it should be. And, you really need to be able to get your gun out from concealment, pointed in, and 2 shots fired in 2 seconds or less. Mm-hmm. Right. That's really the crux or the pinnacle of your training needs to be that or better.
Yeah, and doing it in safely under stress in an unknowable or an unknown situation.
Stress induced, and that's the thing that you can't iterate enough with people is like, okay, this is great when you're shooting in a controlled environment. Okay, that's easy. There's nobody shooting at you, nobody trying to kill you. When somebody's trying to shoot at you and kill you, it takes on a whole new meaning and what it feels like. And I use little tricks, and this usually does the trick for folks. Yeah. As I'm like teaching the class, I start amping things up, and I never put them under pressure, but I add that sense of urgency through timing, or like one of the things I'll do. So I'm walking them through malfunctions. I'm like, what's the symptom on a type 1? They're rattling it off. What's the symptom on a type 2? They're rattling it off. What's the symptom on a type 3? They rattle it off. And then, all right, how do we fix a type 1? They're rattling it off, right? We start getting through the class, and we've walked through these malfunctions several times, so they kind of feel like they got to know it, right?
Yeah, they're familiar with it. They're confident.
Yeah, and then I walk up to them and I go, hey, what's the symptom on a type 1? Come on. And I snap my fingers. That's all I'm doing. I'm just snapping my fingers.
Really?
And they're like, they start stammering, and I'm like, okay, so this is that sense of urgency. It's not pressure.
The stress, yeah.
Yeah, but just that. I want you to think about just that and how it cobbled your brain. And then I want you to think about somebody trying to kill you and maim you and how exponentially bigger that gets in your mind.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And they go, the light kind of comes on.
Yeah. Yeah, we've talked about, and I've experienced it too in classes where even just a timing, like a shot timer.
Oh, yeah.
That's another great one where it's like, okay, like, because it introduces that sense of urgency where you want to do it faster, and sometimes even shoot faster than maybe you're comfortable doing. Yep. And, putting 4 or 5 shots as fast as you can on target or whatever is an exhilarating feeling and to one degree, but also like, wow, it's like you can really be unsafe really quickly. So you have to really have your skills.
And it goes back to those basics where you're learning the draw. You learn when to take that safety off. You learn when to punch out. You learn when to take the slack out of the trigger, Everything is regimented, and it becomes, and I always tell people, when you're first learning this and you're doing these steps, the 5 count to a draw, from draw to punched in, you're walking and talking yourself through it. It better sound very robotic and very syncopated when you start. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah,
and you're
steps,
just, and I always tell people, talk and walk yourself through it forwards, talk and walk yourself through it backwards. And it's like, I'm a musician, so I play guitar.
Okay, yeah.
And, learning scales. You learn a scale, whatever scale it is, Mixolydian, Aeolian, there's a million of them out there, right?
Yeah.
And so it's all about finger pattern, right? Mm-hmm. And when you're learning those patterns, you only go as fast as you can go and get every note perfect all the way down and all the way back up. And if you mess it up, you got to learn how to run through it without starting over, because you don't get a do-over. In the middle of a solo, you don't get a do-over. You take off, or you figure out how to.
Or you just carry on.
Yeah, figure it out.
That's part of being a professional too, or and being a master of the skills that you have. So it sounds like you really just take a reality kind of based approach to instructing, which I think not a ton of people do. I mean, a lot of people I know and a lot of instructors that I've had bring their experience to the table, which is great, and talk about it. But I feel like you're really bringing that reality to people and like making them understand.
I try to. That's really my heart and my passion, is that people understand they're not as ready as they think they are. Sure. And I always tell them, hey, you're not going to get there without practice. You're not going to get there without training. I really hit hard on the fact, follow up. You're going to take this minimum 8-hour class, and the majority, you're going to walk out of this building Go buy a gun, strap it on, and think that you're ready to handle it, because our brains are wired to succeed. We're predators, basically.
Sure.
We're designed to face things head on. We're designed to win, and so that's how our brain sets everything up. Well, we're going to win. We're just going to win.
It's almost like a foregone conclusion. It's just going to happen.
Is.
Yeah,
it really is. And so that's the other thing I kind of bring out in class is the brain science. Why our brains go where they go, why they think the way they think, and what we have to do to make a cognitive decision, the OODA loop. I bring up the OODA loop, and I use the dollar bill on the table way to kind of bring that out. You think you're ready, but if you're reacting, you're already behind. You're at deficit already. Mm-hmm. And so the only way to get from that act to or from that observe to act is through training, is through skill-based training.
And just repetitions and doing it over and over and over again.
To the point it becomes muscle memory. And now, I'm an awkward dude. I mean, I am left-handed.
Oh, me too.
But I shoot right-handed.
Oh,
I'm
really?
left eye dominant. And so,
wow, you are backwards.
Yeah, God's like, hey, watch, I'm going to screw this kid up. But when I shoot, it's people are like, what the heck are you doing? Because it was the first thing that broke me of at front sight. I used to lay my head on my shoulder.
Oh, really?
To get sight acquisition.
Okay,
right?
interesting.
They're like, quit moving your head. Let the gun do the work. So now you watch my draw stroke. My gun comes up to my face in the 4 count of the draw, where I'm getting sight alignment, sight picture, taking the slack out as I'm punching out.
Right.
But it's over my left eye.
Yeah, so it's cocked over, and it probably looks awkward on the range.
Yeah, because it's coming over here instead of coming straight, really right out from the holster. And that brings up another thing. I've brought a couple of guys here that were like, they couldn't close their non-dominant eye.
Yeah. Really?
Yes. And so the phenomena that I saw, because when you're working with 20 to 30 people on the firing range, you're just doing all you can do to make sure nobody gets shot.
Right. Maximizing safety. Yeah.
I brought 2 guys out here, and both of them, same thing. They kept both eyes open, and I could see what was happening with the brain. The brain was trying to figure out which eye was going to shoot, and their gun was moving from left to right.
Really? That's
almost
wild.
like, have you ever seen the nystagmus test that the police do when they're doing the sobriety test?
Oh, yeah, with the pen going back and forth.
The eyes bounce, right? Well, it's almost the same phenomena when people keep both eyes open with the gun, trying to focus on that front sight.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, you either need to learn how to bring that gun to your dominant eye and let that dominant eye focus, or close that non-dominant eye. And it was just so weird to see that. I mean, I've never really seen it until I brought somebody here.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
I was going to say it's funny because I'm left-handed. I shoot left-handed, but I'm right-eye dominant.
Okay, so you're cross-dominant.
But I shoot pistols left-handed, but I shoot long guns right-handed. So yeah, I'm cross-dominant. So what I've kind of done, I took the Bill approach, the Bill Hanley approach, where it comes up and you just move your head over just a little bit.
Okay.
So I don't move my head a ton, but having to overcome that, I didn't even know what eye dominance was until I started shooting. And I was like, oh, I'm left-handed. I must be left-eye dominant. And I was like, I was shooting like crap. Yeah. And then it's like, oh, wait a minute, like eye dominance. And I did the whole test or whatever, a couple of, I'm like, I must be right-eye dominant. And then
and that's the thing. Things change when you're
just
shooting.
Weird, man. I've never had that issue.
Hey, get out. Go to your room. I'll be there shortly. No, I think for me, like shooting a rifle, both eyes open, because I have objective long distance and I have objective through a lens, because I don't know how many deer I've lost closing that non-dominant eye, looking through the scope.
Right.
And you see hooves go up, but then you're like, well, wait a minute, everything looks the same from this purview, you know?
Yeah.
So I started learning to shoot with both eyes open, and that eliminated that. But when we're talking about defensive, we're talking a pretty short distance, and you really have got to be focused on that dominant eye, or else things just don't go right. You know?
But like you said, I mean, like you're just taking the way the brain works into account, the way your eyes work into account. It's a different approach than what I've heard, which sounds kind of cool. So
and you see those guys that put their head way down inside, below really their gun. Mm-hmm. Well, that phenomenon happens. That same nystagmus phenomenon is, I've heard it called turtling.
Yeah.
So your head is way down there.
Yeah.
Well, your eyes do the same thing. They have that involuntary bounce because we're not designed that way. Our eyes are designed to look straight on, predator type, and so. Yeah, it was, and that's something I've learned through watching the videos at Legal Heat,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And I never really thought about it, but then I'm like, that makes sense. That totally makes sense, because when you're intoxicated and you do the horizontal nystagmus test, they get to 45 and they bounce like nobody's business,
Yeah.
And so I'm
crazy.
like, okay, I can understand how that would work where,
Vertically,
you're
it's the same
below
thing.
your line of sight.
Yeah, actually, speaking of Leroy too, he taught me with rifles where instead of bringing your head down to the gun, you bring the gun up to you, and it's way more comfortable, and you can shoot a lot better that way. So same principle with any firearms. Really.
I love Leroy. He's just a big lug. He's
I know.
an awesome dude.
We've got to have him on the podcast. We haven't had a chance to have him on yet, but
I'd love to be a part of that too.
Yeah, he's a
Leroy,
fascinating character.
when I was at Crossfire, I would hire Leroy to go with me to SHOT Show. And it was
cool.
Always a riot.
Yeah,
always a riot.
Yeah, I bet you he knows how to have a good time.
Oh, he does. Yeah, yeah.
Steve, you got anything?
No, I was just thinking, you talk about Leroy. Every time people come into the shop, apparently we look similar enough, even though he's a lot taller. He's got like a foot on me.
Yeah.
He's like, he'd always introduce people to people as his son. This is my son, Steve.
Oh, that's perfect.
And everybody would believe him. Like, are you serious?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, are you going to question anything he says? Because he's
No.
like a foot taller than everybody?
Uh-huh.
Not a guy his size.
Yeah,
When Leroy talks, you listen.
Yeah, you let him do whatever. So, well, let's switch gears real quick over to the Ultimate Hybrid holster because, I mean, how did you kind of get into holster making and everything? Because it's like we talked about this Nick Hoffer. It's like one of those things that everybody has, but you don't think about.
Yeah.
Until you're like, or you're cycling through a bunch, but you don't think about like how they get made or the story behind them. They're just there,
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people take them for granted. But so how did you kind of get into holster making?
Well, so it all started. I've been a gun guy. I grew up in the pawn business, so I know guns intimately. I mean, I can look at models, and I can even see somebody's like, "What is that?" You can only see the top of it. It's this and that. I mean, I know intimately guns, and so I had a friend that worked for a holster company, Crossfire Shooting Gear, and he's like, "Man, there's this company that builds holsters, and nobody knows anything about guns." And I'm like, what?
That doesn't make sense.
How does that work?
Yeah,
and so the owner, his dad shot himself with a gun because of an improper holster, and that's kind of how he got started. But it didn't make him a gun expert, right?
Right.
And so he's like, we need somebody that knows guns. So I came on board, and I basically spent 5 years working for Crossfire, and it's a sewn good, so it's a soft good. It wasn't the Kydex realm, so I kind of got to know holsters in, and that's when I designed. I was carrying a holster made by somebody else at the time I started working there.
Okay.
And I showed it to one of the guys in the back, and he goes, why are you wearing that piece of crap? And I'm like, it's the only thing I can find that I really like. I had cut it down and
You had modified it,
make it work for me, right?
Yeah.
And he goes, man, let's do something with the stuff that Crossfire does, the ballistic material with the memory foam core. And I'm like, okay, so that's how that first design came about. The holster, I named it. It was my design.
Yeah.
It was called the Undercover, and it became Crossfire's best-selling holster because it was universal. It was inside or outside the waistband, and so that was really kind of my first acclimation towards the whole holster realm.
Okay.
Well, as we got going, I met Nick somewhere through my connections at going to SHOT Show. I've been going to SHOT Show since I was 10 years old.
Well, the gun world's kind of it's not a big world. Everybody kind of seems to know everybody.
Everybody in the Valley knows everybody, and then you go to SHOT Show and you know everybody there.
Right, exactly.
So Nick and I were talking, and he goes, man, we need to design a hybrid that's like a Kydex shell with, something soft that's more comfortable on the back. And so we started talking, and then Nick and I designed a holster for Crossfire that I called the EDC. It was trademarked, and so that was our design. And so it became the Undercover and the EDC are Crossfire's to date still their best sellers.
Wow,
and
that's impressive.
It was owned by some investors out of Texas. They, and how it is with investors, they're just looking at making money, and they turn around and turn in the company. And so I worked for Ron Martinez. If you know in the industry, you know that Ron Martinez was the CEO of Crossfire. So I worked directly with Ron, and then he bought Gemtech.
Yep.
So he bought Gemtech.
Okay.
Kind of turned it into a superpower by itself. Ron's quite a man. And so I was on the pro staff for Gemtech and working for Crossfire. Well, through the investors, they told them to let me go. So I lost my job.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what? We can take this design, this idea, and make it better.
Sure, yeah.
And so Nick and I kind of got together, and we launched Ultimate Hybrid in January of 2018, and started building this newer hybrid holster. And the thing that we effectively did, too, is we added supporting products because there was only one product for Crossfire.
Right.
Well, we figured out how to take the same shell, the same backer, and make 5 different SKUs out of it, making 3 inside the waistband and 2 outside the waistband.
That's impressive.
Yeah, and so now I'm currently working on a 1911 shell, because 1911 is another whole breed.
That's a whole nother animal.
Yeah, and so I'm working on that.
You deal with the whole, not just a breed of gun, but a breed of gun owner.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, and I'm working on a J-frame revolver, and so same thing there. If I can design those 2, I can design 5 supporting products that go with it that are 3 inside the waistband, 2 outside the waistband, and then if I do, my next thought was the micro pistols.
Oh, sure, like single stacks and everything.
Yeah, the little 938s, 238s, 43, 42. And our holster fits the 42. That's kind of on the lowest side of what it'll fit.
Sure.
But anything larger pretty much fits. And so we figured out how to take this Kydex shell, open it up, and allow it to fit everything and still get that kind of trigger lock that you get from Kydex, but have the comfort of a memory foam core, spacer mesh, which is a material designed by NASA. It's a wicking material, and it's got some foam to it. So that's laminated to the memory foam, and then there's 600 denier Cordura laminated to the other side. So we designed a whole new backer, and took the shell idea to the next generation and started Ultimate Hybrid.
Yeah, and I've heard nothing but good things about it, and it's been going all over the place, right?
Yeah. So we're in the NRA store, so we got the NRA online store and catalog this year, and so that's going. They sold 250 units in the first quarter.
Oh wow!
And so that's our biggest deal. I've got 100 and some undercover DHS agents wearing this holster.
No way.
Yeah, and several Canyon County off-duty guys wear the Ultimate Hybrid.
That's
and so
awesome.
it's, we're a small company, we're a startup, and it's just been me and sales.
Yeah.
And when you're a new company, you can't get like sales reps to save your life. They're like, we don't know you, nobody knows you.
You don't have a reputation.
You don't have a reputation.
Yeah.
And so, I've been trying, and it's not happened. And so it's just been me on the phone, and of course I'm trying to do the training on top of doing the holster company. So
do you sleep?
I do, but my mind is consumed with these things, either training or figuring out that new design. And I've got an entire setup in my garage, and Nick's the one that really kind of acclimated me into this whole Kydex producing side, because
that's his bread and butter.
Yeah, that was really his thing. And so, he taught me everything, and I've worked with Nick, worked for Nick.
Yeah.
It's really an intriguing process, and my mind's creative. I like to build things. I like to make things.
Right.
I like to fix things, and so it's been kind of a natural progression for me. So I built my own vacuum table, built my own router table.
Right.
My wife bought me a heat press for Christmas this year.
Oh, wow, very cool.
I built my first 1911 prototype last month, and I've been prototyping it, making sure it worked. And
so the real question, though, is when are you going to make a lefty one?
Here's the problem. Everybody asks that because, as lefties, we're like, hey, we're part of that crowd too.
Yeah.
But
Nick rebuffed me pretty hard when I asked about that.
Because the thing that people don't understand is the tooling costs us the same regardless of what it is, right? And so if I pay $2,500 or $1,500 for a tool for, like, say, the Ultimate Hybrid that we have right now, in order for me to do a lefty, I got to spend the same $1,500, and that market is 10% of what
you're not going to make. It's going to take 10 times as long to make back your money.
It takes a long time to realize that cost, and we actually went to because we launched our company on a pre-sale.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And we sold enough in the pre-sale to fund our first production.
To make it happen, yeah.
Yeah, and so that really kind of helped us out. So there wasn't a ton of money out of pocket. And we tried to do a pre-sale on lefties. We sold one.
Not so much.
Yeah, I remember he told us that.
Yeah, when lefties tell me, hey, man, you guys need to build a left. I'm like, if you lefties would put your money where your mouth is, we would already have it. But,
it'd already be there. But
yeah, and, I think we're seeing a bigger trend of lefties than we've ever seen.
Really?
Yeah. I've always said that the left-hand market is about 10%. You can figure, 10 to 12% is usually where the left-handed market is. Yeah. But I've seen kind of a growing, increasing left-handed market.
Well, you see more guns nowadays that are ambidextrous friendly anyway. So
and they really should be, because here's the other thing that I try to get the reality to students in the class is, sometimes you can't reach the controls.
Right.
And so, sometimes there's a balance between choosing the right gear.
Or you have to shoot with your offhand or anything. Yeah.
Yeah. Or, and I always tell people there's nothing wrong with cheating. If you're running your gun and you can't reach the slide release, use your left thumb. It's over there too.
Yeah.
And so I'm like trying to you adapt and overcome. And so, you change things. Or if you can't get that magazine released with your left thumb on your right, your thumb on your right hand, use your left hand. It's okay. It's not cheating. Nobody cares. The bad guy's not going to care. Well, he's going to care when you shoot him, but as
long as you're going to get what you want to get done. That's
exactly
the whole point.
Right. So. And that's I always tell people.
It's kind of funny that there's those pre-programmed training scars before they even really have any training.
Yeah.
Have you noticed? Yeah. It's kind of funny.
Well, and my biggest I guess pet peeve are my favorite quote in all the world is, and I learned this from Matt Schneider, Forward Movement: "Ego is not your amigo." And I've got,
I like it.
I've been teaching long enough that I've had Navy SEALs, I've had FBI agents, I've had all these different people in my classes. And at the end of the day, they all learn something. And,
That's cool.
Just because you have a plethora of training doesn't necessarily mean you're effective. Like I always like to point out, and this is the other unfortunate thing in the industry, in our industry as instructors. You have a lot of law enforcement and military out there. Well, there's a huge disconnect between civilian life and law enforcement and military, right?
Oh, yeah.
Military,
sure.
You're wearing body armor, you have an objective, you have rules of engagement, and you have standard operating procedures. You go out there to do a job. Well, we don't get that. We get the deficit. We get the bad guy who picks the time and the place and the conditions, and then we have to deal with it.
Yeah, we're just going about our lives.
Yeah, and so it's not the same. It's an entirely different environment. And so too many, I think, instructors approach it from that military or law enforcement side where it's not the same. Everything is different. The rules have all changed.
Yeah, well, even the mindset, I would say, is different because I think most civilians and people just living out their lives don't think the same way that military and law enforcement through the years are kind of conditioned to think and observe and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah. Well, if you really think about it, I mean, what's the first thing that happens when you get off the bus when you enlist? They're yelling and screaming at you, right?
Yeah.
And so they're trying to get you to operate on a more linear basis without being affected by emotion. Mm-hmm. And that's right. That's where we need to learn how to... that's what I tell people at the end of the day in this whole realm. You can't make an emotional based decision because it could have some really downside ramifications later that we don't want to have to deal with, right?
Yeah.
So, when you're in the military, they acclimate you to that. They acclimate you to operating under pressure and operating with somebody yelling and screaming at you, where you got all this audible and visual stimuli that you're trying to get the job done in that arena.
Yeah, you kind of inoculate yourself from stress, or they inoculate you from stress, and that we've talked about that on the podcast before with different was it Colonel Cooper's color codes of awareness, right, Steve?
Yeah, orange, white, orange, yellow, red.
Yeah, we've talked about that quite a few times, and just being situationally aware and like being able to handle situations when you're more situationally aware instead of being caught off guard.
Because you've got some sort of plan or some predisposed idea that this stuff could happen. And I've been accused of being paranoid. I'm not paranoid. I just have a plan. I know I've got that head on the swivel. You're always looking around to see what you have at your disposal, what you can use as a weapon, what you can use as cover, what you can use as an exit. Mm-hmm. Your mind strategizes in the things that you do. And so, when I go out to dinner with a lot of my friends, I know where I'm going to sit because based on strategy, based on, okay, I'm the guy with the gun. I'm the one that's going to protect everybody at the end of the day. So I'm the one that needs to see everything that's going on. And, even carrying on a conversation with a friend, when I look up and I'm huge on honor, integrity, and then like when you're talking to somebody, looking them in the eye. We're talking, right. We got eye contact. That to me, that's respect, right?
Sure. Oh yeah.
But they know that when we're talking and my eyes drift from a conversation that we're having, and I'm watching something, they know. They're like, "What's up? What do you see?"
Yeah.
And it's just that level of awareness where if it doesn't look right, I'm going to kind of
make
focus shift my attention a little bit, and I can still carry on that conversation. But I'm shifting a little bit just to kind of keep an eye on this in case it turns into something else.
Yeah. And that's smart. And that's what I think most people should be doing. You see so many people on their phones, and even especially driving, that's the worst.
Oh, self-hypnosis. We learned about this years ago. When you're so focused on something you're doing, you have no awareness about anything. I mean, somebody could be standing right in front of you, there's no awareness there because it's like that self-hypnotic stage.
Yeah, think about you're at work and somebody's on their phone and they walk right into you because they, like you said, they have no idea what's going on.
No clue. Or, you know, a technique that I use when I'm traveling and I want to quantify somebody because I don't know what their actions are. And I'm, you know, I always use New Orleans because it's like the freakiest city I've ever been to.
Oh, it's a great time. But yeah, it is. There's a lot going on.
Off of Bourbon Street, being followed by a couple of guys. And I'm like, you know, we can't look at somebody and profile what their intentions are. So we have to quantify that, or we have to qualify it some way. So, you know, I'll do things like cross in the middle of the street instead of a crosswalk and see if they're following me. But sometimes people get in that zone, like when you go to the airport and you're just following feet.
Yeah.
Right?
Not
And
paying
you're
attention.
past your gate. And same thing happens to other people. So we don't want to create a situation out of something that's nothing.
That's not there.
Right. And so, you know, I was in New Orleans, thought I was being followed. These guys looked a little seedy, you know. I don't know them. And so I walk a couple blocks, cross the middle of the street, they cross the middle of the street, 2 more blocks, cross middle of the street, they cross too. And they started gaining on me a little bit. And I'm like, I don't know what these guys are about. Well, I'm going to find out. So I spin around, throw my hands out and yell, stop, at the top of my lungs. And these 2 guys go, dude, what the hell, you know? And I'm like, nothing, carry on, we're good. But right then and there, I just quantified their motives, right? I was able to, okay, they were in that self-hypnotic state. They were just following feet. They weren't paying attention to who they were following, just that they were following a crowd or following a person.
Especially in Bourbon Street, there's probably alcohol involved in one way or another.
Who knows? You're blitzed, you know?
Yeah.
And so anyway, I use that as a teaching thing in my class. You know, you can quantify things by having an interaction or having a, you know, I don't care what country you go to, what language they speak, throwing your hands out and yelling stop means the same thing in every country. And you know, if that creates shock in them, you know that they're probably okay.
Right.
You know?
Because if not, then they've got less than ideal motives.
Right. If they postured or they're like, you know, they keep after it, well, okay, well, now I know they're up to no good, so now I got to up my game, right? And so...
Yeah, that's cool. That's a good way to think of things, like you said, because like you said, I think a lot of people just take a class, buy a gun, and they think they're set. And we've talked about that a bunch, where that's just the beginning.
Yeah, well, that gun does not come with a cape, unfortunately, and a lot of people think it does because it ends up being the first tool instead of the last tool. And you know, my best friend is a building contractor, and I always use him as an example. I'm like, you know, my buddy doesn't show up on the job with just a screwdriver or his stiletto hammer or his rip saw or his worm drive skill saw or his table saw. It's a trailer full of tools, and it's the right tool for the right job. And you know, this whole personal protection realm is no different. We don't want to escalate to a gun when there's no call for it. We want to use the least possible force that we can until that force is needed.
Yeah, you only escalate till you need to. So.
Right.
Yeah, and we talked about it before. It's amazing the misconception that happens that, oh yeah, that's all. I'll just use the gun to stop the threat right off the bat. I'll fire a couple warning shots.
Oh, that's the other bad piece of advice that I hear in the class. Well, I'll just shoot him in the leg, or I'll shoot a warning shot. It is far harder for an attorney to get you off knowing that you did not shoot somebody because you were trying to scare them, or because in that moment you just admitted that you weren't in fear of your life and able to be able to press the trigger in reasonable conscience and shoot somebody to stop action for something that was going to cause protracted loss of life or limb.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, and it's good intentions, but what do they say about good intentions?
And like I said, you know, at the end of the day, that court battle, you know, you're not really going to care whether you were right or wrong or indifferent if you're in jail for 30 years for homicide.
Yeah. It's wild stuff to think about, but you do really have to think about it if you're going to accept that responsibility of concealed carry. So, but let's talk about, do you teach kind of the practical kind of side of concealed carry too? Like, you know, dress and like,
I do.
You know,
yeah.
I try about that a little.
I try to talk about all the aspects because it really is an art. And, you know, I talk about concealed carry like, it's like anything that is not comfortable. There's nothing convenient about it. Nothing.
Right.
And I always tell people, it's like wearing contacts. You know, if you don't wear them every day for 90 days, you'll never get used to them.
Right.
And, you know, it's not that they quit feeling like sandpaper in your eyes. It's just that you get acclimated to the discomfort. And concealed carry is no different. There's always going to be some discomfort or inconvenience about it. And you mitigate those things through gear, through clothing choices, through, you know, most people don't even think about the fact that there are 4, 5, and 6 belt loop pants. And that's going to change where you can carry, how things are going to attach. The other thing that people don't talk about is, or think about, what do you do when you go poop?
Yeah.
If you've ever been to front sight and you hit the head at the same time as 40 other people on your firing line, and you hear clink, clank, clunk, guns hitting the deck because people aren't properly retaining them, or
oh wow,
Well,
imagine having that happening in a public bathroom somewhere.
At my old place of employment, I found the owner's handgun on the toilet paper rack twice. My son found it the last time, and I basically said, if this happens again, you're not getting it back.
Damn.
Yeah. Just not getting it back. That's irresponsible. That's
irresponsible at best.
Yeah. And if you can't retain your weapon, you have no business carrying a weapon.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just what it boils down to.
But yeah,
that right there is one of the biggest reasons why I stopped carrying at 6 o'clock. Because that's when I very first started carrying, it was 6 o'clock.
Okay.
Super uncomfortable, but yeah, bathroom breaks was even worse. I feared that gun was going in the toilet before anything else did.
You're going for a dive.
Yeah. Let's talk about positions of carry and stuff. Do you kind of teach one over the other? Or is it
I really do, because for me, like I said, trying to set people up for success rather than the thing that you don't want is furtive movement. You don't want extraneous movement getting to your gun. And so for me, the most natural place is strong side, slight cant. And then in your draw stroke, you're talking about economy of motion, just like you're talking about when you're doing a scale on a guitar. You want the least amount of movement to be able to get the gun out, and that creates the time gap, because time is our most valuable asset in this whole altercation, right? And so if we can make everything work the way it's supposed to and set us up for the next move, to me that's economy of motion coming from the holster to joining, punching out, taking the slack out. Everything is just like rolling at the same time. And I teach techniques like, when we're dealing with malfunctions, we're always checking to see if we have a magazine. So we're doing things like, I always tell people, if you're getting shot at, your number one objective is to move to cover. While you're getting your gun out, or if you've already got it out, you need to be moving to cover. Well, I'm doing three things at once. I'm moving to cover. If I've got a malfunction, if it's a type 2 or type 3, I've got to do a visual inspection, not just the click, no bang.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm looking at the ejection port. I'm checking for a magazine on my way to cover.
And you're moving.
And I'm moving. So I'm doing three things at once, all economy of motion to effectively create the same thing. And that checking for a magazine lets me know what's in my repertoire. If I've got a type 3 malfunction, which is a double feed or a brass low, I want to know that I got another magazine so I can strip this one to the ground and put a new one in.
Go, yeah.
If I don't, well, guess what? The bullets that are in that magazine that's in that gun are the only ones I got, so I want to make sure I retain it. So you're setting yourself up for all these little things that create success rather than that, I always tell people, if you try to guess what's wrong with your gun, your guess is always wrong under stress. And then you're trying to fix a malfunction that doesn't exist, which fogs the brain even more.
Yeah, you're kind of like going down a rabbit hole at that point of confusion.
Yeah, and then your brain, so when your brain gets overloaded with too much visual and audible and stimuli, it locks up, right? We get in that blackout phase where our brain just freeze, deer in headlights.
Sensory overload,
yeah. And so I always tell people, if you symptomize it, then you know where to go. You're not guessing. You're not trying to, and like when I'll set malfunctions up with people on the firing line, they're like, they know I'm getting ready to call them. I'm like, don't set yourself up to know what it is, because guess what? About the time you think you know what it is, it's something else.
It's going to be something different.
I've seen a type 1 malfunction turn into a type 2 and then turn into a type 3.
Really?
All because they weren't symptomized.
Wow.
Or like I told a guy, I watched a guy, when you tell him to tap it, rack it, and flip it, he was flipping it with the ejection port up instead of down.
So nothing was falling out?
Well, not only that, but I actually have seen this. When you've done it enough times, you see it, right?
Yeah.
Rotates it to the left, racks it, that empty round comes out and lands right back in the ejection port. So then creates another malfunction.
That's a whole other mess,
Yeah. And I'm like, ejection port down, let gravity do the job, And so, I try to bring across the effectiveness of doing the right thing every time. That way you're setting yourself up for success when you're already behind.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about, concealed carry, talk about your podcast a little bit. Obviously, are these things kind of things you cover on the podcast?
Yeah, I do. So the last podcast I talked about going from that unconscious, what we don't know, to that muscle memory phase.
Yeah.
We'll talk about things like, 2 weeks ago I talked about the Virginia thing.
Oh,
the Virginia church shooting. No. Yeah, so that was before the Virginia. Yeah, the timeline of events with the government.
Oh, with the gun laws and
how they
the
changed the vote count in the middle of a recall.
Oh wow.
Oh yeah, the governor and the rest of the government in Virginia, while active recall was going on, and they had 1/3 of the numbers they needed to change or to get that recall in. Mm-hmm. They voted to change the requirement from 10% to 25%. So they moved the field goal. Right?
That's crazy.
Yeah. And so I kind of posted this timeline of events and how it all started kind of trickling and how it ended up in the rally.
Yeah, which was very cool to see. 25,000 people and not a single problem.
Not a single problem. They picked up after themselves. And I'm like, if that doesn't tell you motive, intent, honor, and integrity right there, when people talk about these crazy gun guys and all of us 2A guys that are just like nuts, and when we go and have a peaceful protest where we're not looting and rioting,
and everybody's armed,
and then we walk away and pick up our trash, you know what, that should tell you enough. And this is, again, we can talk about politics, we can talk about this in anything, but when we operate from emotion rather than rationale or from informed decisions, it never goes well. It just never goes well.
Yeah, it's usually a reaction, an emotional reaction. Doesn't do any good.
So one of the podcasts I talked about the church shooting in Texas, and how that was the guy that stopped that was very well trained. And if you look around, and it wasn't typical of an active shooter situation, because you only hear screaming from the side where the action was happening. If you watch the video, most everybody else was in a calmed, relaxed, and had no realization what was actually happening.
Yeah, they didn't even have time to react.
No, I mean, this whole thing happened in 6 seconds. And if you look, I think the total number of guns drawn were about 10.
Oh, wow.
But by then, the whole thing was already over. And this guy took I don't know what the distance was. I'm guessing it was probably like
10, 15 yards.
It was a pretty good distance.
It wasn't super close.
I bet it was 35 feet.
It was a little out of the typical what we would classify a personal protection realm, or MAW distance, whatever you want to call it. But this guy was very effective in one shot, stop
the threat,
face right in the face, where stops all action. Not anybody, people are like. This is another misconception. I hear a lot of people say, well, I'll just shoot the gun out of his hands. No, you won't.
People say that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a precision
Realistically?
shot. Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God.
Like I said, especially in these classes like Cabela's and Sportsman's Warehouse, I hear so many things that people say they're going to do, and I'm like, you think you're going to do it, but I guarantee you it just doesn't work like that.
No, man, that's crazy. Because we've talked. Go ahead,
I saw it on John Wick, the second one.
Exactly.
And I'm pretty sure I can do that because I play airsoft.
Well, that's what I tell people. This stuff doesn't work by osmosis. You can't watch YouTube. You can't keyboard or couch commando your way into training.
Yeah.
You have to actually do it. You can't, sit on YouTube all day and watch guys that are really good at what they do, and then expect that you're just going to go out there, and in your mind it looks that way. But when you hit the reality of things, and then that stress level hits a place where you don't even know what your amygdala response is, whether that's fight, flight, freeze, posture, you don't even know what it is.
Yeah. What is your podcast called again?
Openly Concealed. And it's in conjunction with Idaho Enhanced Academy and Two Wolves Media.
Okay, cool. And where can find it anywhere podcasts or
so if you go to Two Wolves Media, there's an Openly Concealed discussion board there.
Okay, cool.
And they're usually posted there. I think now they're cross-posting to Idaho Enhanced Academy.
Cool.
So you can see them there. And, we welcome, I love to have these conversations where I can just talk to people, because to me, we can all do a better job if we listen to people. And if people are asking questions and saying, hey, how do you deal with this? What do I do in this case? Or, what is your thought on the legalities of this? Well, then we can talk about it, and then people can understand, hey, it's not what you think it is. It's something really altered to everything you've ever thought about this whole realm.
Yeah, and there's all those misconceptions and things that you may not even think about. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I could spend all day, and I tell people I could probably spend all day talking about the types of actions and parts, and
sure.
I love that in-depth But I just, it's really a passion for me.
Yeah,
it really
I could tell.
So.
You could really tell that you really care about not just the safety and the instruction part, but really the practicality and the real world application.
And I think that's another thing we started talking about too. Talking about the whole instruction side. Mm-hmm. I've never done this for money. I mean, when the money's good, it's great.
Sure.
But I don't do it because of the money. I do it because I'm passionate about it. And I think that's the problem with a lot of instructors. In fact, believe it or not, I know instructors that don't even like guns.
Really?
Yeah. And in fact, I did a ride along with the Nampa police officer one time, and he told me, I don't even like guns. I'm like, whoa, wait. Stop the car for a second. I'm like, dude, you're in a profession that carries a gun as a profession. This should not be your job, And he goes, I'm like, why did you decide to be a cop? Well, my dad was a cop, and I'm like,
just wanted to live the legacy.
Yeah. And I'm like, dude, listen, do yourself a favor, find a different career, because, if you don't like guns and that's what you do as a profession, you're setting yourself up for failure, man.
Yeah, that's kind of scary.
Yeah.
Well, I've said this before. A friend of mine is one of the post instructors here in Idaho, and I asked him straight up, I was like, how many students you got that come through that have never even touched a firearm before?
Oh, boy.
And he didn't even have to think about it. He's like, probably 60%.
Wow.
That have never even messed with firearms.
Well, I always throw this out there, too. Do you guys know what the national hit average is for law enforcement?
It's like 20%.
It's super low.
22%, 23%, something like that. I think it came up this last year.
Wow.
Well, and honestly, if you look nationwide, that's not just an isolated conversation that you had with the Nampa Police Department guy. I mean, look at most of the law enforcement around. It seems that they're not super pro Second Amendment. At least the vocal ones aren't, anyways, I guess.
Yeah, that's the problem. It's the vocal ones.
It's crazy. It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, but that's why we have good people like Terry to train and teach us about what we need to know and have a podcast. So yeah, that'd be cool to maybe we can come onto your podcast and have a conversation.
Yeah, that would be great. I love it. I love this. I think that's another philosophy about this whole thing. Mm-hmm. So many people get into this mindset. It's either my way or no way, or my way or the highway. And I'm like, I grew up in the pawn business. Well, I could tell you every other pawn shop owner's name because I frequented in their business.
Really?
Yeah. And I'm like, if I can't help you, I will send you to somebody who can. And that's really my philosophy. If I can't get it done for you, I will refer you to somebody who can get it done for you, because it's more important to me that you get what you need than it is that I get $1.
Right.
And
that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, and I think
it's collaborative.
I say that even in this whole concealed carry realm, if we were all just more considerate of the other person than we are of ourselves, we would live in a way better world.
Oh, sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a perfect segue into our 5 questions.
5 questions.
So now,
Steve.
Now it's my turn, Terry.
Yeah. We're gonna
you wonder why I haven't said much this whole time.
Oh, you're just waiting to put me under pressure, huh?
Yeah.
All right.
No, it's no pressure. This is nothing too difficult. So every guest we bring on, we decided a while ago to make it a little bit more a get to know you, not just like how you feel about your occupation or whatever it might be. So these questions are designed to let our listeners get to know Terry a little bit more.
Okay, sounds good.
So there's 5, and like I say, we ask every one of our guests these same questions. So,
okay, well, I told you I'm easy like Sunday morning, so.
Okay. So we're going to jump into it then if you're that easy.
Yeah.
Okay, number 1. Okay, what experience in your life has been the most influential and why?
It would either be getting shot with 12 gauge, or I always relate back to another incident that happened to me in high school. I got picked on a lot, so I started learning how to defend myself. I took Nidacon, Shotokan, Keishinkan, karate, started learning how to protect myself, and I got into a fight that completely reshaped the way I think about that ego is not your amigo thing.
Sure.
I got hit, and I hit this guy twice, and then did a front snap kick that knocked him like up and on his back.
Oh, wow.
And, all because high school kids, one of them flipped me off. I gave him the arm, the French arm, whatever you call it. I don't even know what it is. It's some, and that in that moment that I didn't even realize it was there. There was that hidden warrior that just came out in that moment of, because
adrenaline
through all this training,
and all that.
and it made me think, hindsight, what if I would have killed that kid? What if he would have been in a coma? What if a concussion,
paralyzed or anything?
Yeah, and I am like, all because somebody wants to prove how tough they are.
Sure.
And so I think that reshaped, and I think that's the thing that really led me to where I am. And I told another story in my podcast about something that happened at the pawn shop, kind of a similar using lethal force that could have completely changed the way I lived my life based on how that thing went down. And we can talk about that another time, but there have been like 3 key things in my life that have shaped, I think, who I am and what I am and why I do what I do today.
Wow, there you go.
So
it's a great answer.
So that was easy. Okay.
All right.
Not too bad. All right, ready for the second one?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you just won the lottery. It's an exorbitant amount of money, like just nothing that you would have expected. What's the first thing you're going to do with that money, and why?
First thing I would do is probably, so I attend a small church that meets at Nampa Christian High School. I would build a building.
Cool.
Because
Nice.
my dad was a Pentecostal preacher, so I grew up religious. I believe there is a God. He put us here for a reason. And, that's the other thing about my whole thing as an instructor. I have been so close to death through, being shot. I've been hunting and had bullets graze my ears out on the river,
Good
shooting
grief.
shotguns.
Wow.
And so I think I kind of felt like, God has me here for a purpose. And it was my wife that said, you're too passionate about this to let it go.
Really?
And so, yeah. And so, I figure God's kept me alive for a reason. And I think this is it. So,
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, like I said, you really tell you're passionate about it and you really care about it, which is a nice thing to see.
So the first thing would be a church. And then after that, it would be a facility like Front Sight here in the Valley.
That would be cool. That would be super cool. We've talked about a bunch of times how we're blessed to have so many manufacturers and facilities
absolutely.
and stuff here in the Valley, but could always use some more.
Yep.
So,
And man, I've got some ideas. We need to talk.
All right. Sounds good.
well, you guys need to win the lottery first too. So
That's
Okay.
true, that's
Well,
true.
you got to play it to win it. So
that's true
Yeah,
too.
that's the other part, right?
Yeah. So nice. All right. Cool.
All right, number 3. What is your biggest fear?
the legalities of a defensive shooting. That is truly my biggest fear.
That not like ticks or anything else. Just
Oh, no.
okay.
Well, in fact, I just recently did a one of those escape houses with my
An escape room. Yeah.
over in Nampa, and it was dark, and so of course everybody's, and in my mind, again, being linear kind of thinking, I'm like, this is not real. And so nothing scares me, right?
Sure.
And so
Yeah, you're in a
they had
controlled
this thing where
environment.
you had to put your hand in the sink and it felt like the dishwasher or the disposal was coming on.
Oh, really?
I'm like, it's not real.
What
Reach
the
in, grab it. I had to reach into this thing that looked like a body that had goo in it, that had a key. And it's like, it's not real. It's not real, So
Wow.
I just don't let fear dictate my actions.
Sure.
Nice.
That would have been pretty interesting to see. Just,
It was fun.
No big deal. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, if we were in an environment that was unknown, then I probably would have been a little more, I would have been a little more MacGyverish. But
Sure. That's cool that you can kind of turn it on and turn it off,
Yeah.
though. I mean, but that's all through training. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, number 4. What would you say is your biggest achievement?
Oh, my kids. Being a dad, I mean, I'm getting emotional here. But, I've got 4 kids, 4 grandkids. I got 3 daughters and 1 son. And yeah, just being a dad, I think, is probably my biggest achievement.
Cool. Yeah, we've heard that one a few times about being a parent, and
Yeah.
I'm not one. But
I mean, I could go out and make $1 million, and it wouldn't matter to me as much as my kids do.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Steve keeps telling me I'll find out sooner or later. So
you will.
See, there it is, yeah.
You do anything, you hurt for your kids. You cry for your kids. You love them like no other.
Yeah, that's
the best gift in the world. Really
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a common answer, but it's a very good one. So cool. Was that 4 or 5?
That was 4.
That was 4.
That's what I thought.
This is
'cause there's one
I
less.
got the round count. Don't worry.
He's paying attention for all of us.
This is my most favorite question. Okay?
All right.
Like, and I always preface it. I know exactly how I would answer, and I always get interested in how other people answer. So, are you ready?
I am ready.
All right. Who would you say is your greatest hero and why?
Greatest hero and why? Oh boy. See, here's part of my problem is I have a hard time just choosing one.
Well,
people
that's why
ask me,
it's
what's your favorite song?
greatest hero, not just a hero, but the hero.
Oh boy. If anything, I think I'd probably have to say my dad. my dad's no longer with us. He's really the one, I think, that taught me a good work ethic, work hard. He's the one that taught me, as wrong as he could be, he taught me integrity and an honor. And, you tell somebody you're going to do something, you do it.
Sure.
And my dad did so many deals on a handshake, and there was no paper involved. It was just a handshake. And like I said, there are times my dad could be really, really wrong, but, he taught me an honest day's work. I worked for my dad for 17 years in the pawn business. And
oh yeah.
I learned a lot of valuable trades, and, I always saw in him times when he was ready to give up where he just worked harder, and put everything in. And so I'd have to say that. But, I got a lot of my friends, I've got mentors in my life, spiritually and financially. And so it's a pretty long list. But,
Sure.
But if I had to top them all off, I would say it's probably my dad.
That's
cool.
awesome.
That's inspiring. So cool. Do you have anything else, Steve? Because that about wraps it up.
No,
Get this guy out of here. He won't shut up.
No, we put you through the ringer and you survived. So, Terry Piper, thank you very much. If anybody wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way to do it?
You can reach me through Idaho Enhanced .com, through ultimatehybridtech.com, or phone numbers are listed there, email,
Cool.
or phone call.
Yeah, and you can always get a hold of us too, and we'll put you in touch with Terry.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
Make sure you check out the podcast, Openly Concealed.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes. Two Wolves Media and Idaho Enhanced Academy.
Awesome. Well, thank you for listening. Well, if you want to get a hold of us, podcast at iishooting.com or at Range Minded Podcast. I think we'll be seeing Terry again on the podcast or doing a crossover or something like that.
Absolutely.
That'd be awesome.
Cool. Thank you, and we will talk to you next time.
Thanks,
Thanks, guys. Be safe.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Range Minded. Find us online at Range Minded Podcast on Facebook, or send us an email at podcast@iishooting.com. We're always happy to get feedback, episode suggestions, whatever you want to send us, really. And be sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and pretty much wherever else you get your podcasts from. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.